Welcome back, everybody, to another episode on the Monster Bass channel. Thank you all for tuning in to yet another one. My name is Brandon Stoker, and on behalf of Monster Bass, guys, we're going to be going over today my top lures for fishing a river system. Before we jump into today's episode, guys, on the Monster Bass channel, if you guys like these types of videos, tips, tricks, out on the water action, guys, we do it all here on the Monster Bass channel. So if you haven't already, make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the Monster Bass channel. Along with that, guys, I run a YouTube channel myself called Wisconsin Wildman, and it'll be linked down below in the description. So I'd really appreciate if you guys would click that link. It'll take you over to my channel. I do a ton of fishing, hunting, all sorts of different stuff out on the channel. So if you guys like that type of content and you want more of it, go on over to the channel and subscribe to the Wisconsin Wildman channel. So like I said, we are talking about river fishing lures. Now, these aren't the only lures that you can use out on a river, but these are the main ones that I use all the time. We're going to go through the lures, and then we're going to go through kind of, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I would use to throw these on. So let's just start off with let's start off with the first one. So the first one that I use a lot, guys, is going to be a swim jig. Now, I use shad color in the fall time. This color right here in the fall time is what I'm using. Dark stained water, muddy water. I'm using black and blue. These are Super K jigs, guys. This is what I use, but black and blue and super stained water. More clear natural water, I like to use green pumpkin with some orange in it. And then like late fall time, I like to use this shad color right here. It works really well. Most of the time, guys, I would say 98% of the time, I'm throwing a 1/4 ounce swim jig. I think it does really well in the current. I have no problems with it, but I use a 1/4 ounce swim jig like 98% of the time. And then I would say 98% of the time, I'm throwing a paddle tail trailer on there. I really like the Rage Tails, guys. They work really, really well. What I love about a swim jig is you can fish it around a lot of vegetation. On river systems, especially the Mississippi River, we get a lot of vegetation, and this thing right here pulls through all that vegetation really well. It also looks really natural coming down the current. This thing just looks really, really good. Banks, I like getting parallel to banks and then throwing a swim jig up the river channel and then bringing it down with the current nice and slow. And it just, if you can run it parallel to the bank, this thing just sits in the strike zone. You can catch a lot of fish doing that parallel to the bank. The swim jig is just one of those lures that on a river system, I don't know what it is, but it just catches fish over and over and over. For setup, I like to use a medium heavy fast action rod. Now I like to use a 7-foot medium heavy fast action rod. I use 20-pound fluorocarbon most of the time because I am throwing this around a lot of vegetation in the summertime, so I like to have some stronger line. And then I also use a 7 3-to-1 reel because, once again, we're fishing around a lot of vegetation, and you want something that's going to be able to get those fish up and out of there. So swim jig is my number one in the summertime, or just on a river system. I don't think you can go wrong with a swim jig. You can catch a lot of fish off of these things. Moving on to the next one, guys, is going to be a flipping jig. Now, whenever I'm flipping banks and things like that, guys, I like to use a flipping jig. More specifically, I like to use a 1/2 ounce. On a river system, you're fishing in a lot more current, but for some reason, even when I don't know, you're always in current for the most part on a river system, but I really, really like using a 1/2 ounce flipping jig. As you guys can see, this one is like a purplish black one. Most of the time when I'm throwing a flipping jig out on the river systems, I'm throwing black and blue, black and purple, and I like to usually team it up with a craw. Usually I'll throw a craw on the back of them. That is pretty much what I'm using most of the time. But I like to use black and blue, or like this right here, black and purple. You can see how good this jig looks. But I like to use a 1/2 ounce because you're in a lot of current for the most part. 3/8 ounce, in my experience, just does not do well in current. So anytime I'm flipping banks or undercut banks, that's when I'm throwing a flipping jig like this, guys. And I'm using, like I said, lots of black and blue, lots of dark colors. I don't know why, I just like to. If the water is clear, I will switch it up to more natural green pumpkin. Sometimes I flip a white jig around a little bit, but I like to use darker colors. But 1/2 ounce flipping jig, guys, with a craw on the back of that, and I promise you guys, you will start catching a lot of fish, especially on undercut banks or up to, down trees and things like that at points where kind of two backwaters meet, things like that. These things work absolutely dynamite for things like that. Now, on a river system, another great thing, guys, is going to be riprap. There's a lot of riprap on river systems, rock and things like that that you can find, wing dams on the Mississippi River, riprap banks, things like that. And that's where I like to throw square bill. Square bill crankbait, specifically this color right here, that red, love it. Or chartreuse and black is another really good one. But square bills, you pretty much can't go wrong with a square bill, especially whenever I see riprap, I pick up my square bill and I start throwing it. I don't know what it is. Smallmouth like to hang around a lot of, wing dams and riprap. And the square bill is a great way to cover a lot of water and cover that riprap. So I have a 7.3. I think it's like a moderate action glass rod for crankbaits. Otherwise, I would probably just use like a medium heavy fast action rod, guys. But anytime I'm around riprap, which there's plenty of that like that on river systems or rock, I'm throwing a square bill. I think pretty much you're gonna find rock no matter what in a river system at some point, and a square bill is a great way to cover that and not get snagged either. You can, square bills are great at coming through rock. So square bill, always have it ready. Now for my number one river lure. That is going to be a topwater frog, guys. Absolutely love fishing a topwater frog on a river system. On the Mississippi especially, tons and tons of duckweed everywhere. Come summertime on the Mississippi River, guys, I'm pretty much throwing a frog 95% of the time. I've got one tied on, couple different rods, and I'm throwing a frog. I like using white frogs, I like using black frog, all different colors of frogs, guys. But frogs are huge on river systems in the summertime. Lots of vegetation, lots of duckweed. Rivers are generally shallow for the most part, so those fish are going to be shallow. They're going to be up under that thick vegetation trying to stay cool. So a nice big frog, guys, is a great way to generate a big strike. And I'm throwing one all the time. I throw frogs just pretty much all the time. I mean, if I had to pick one lure to go out onto the river system with in the summertime, it's going to be a frog. Plain and simple. They work. I'm using one all the time. Every time I see duckweed, I'm like, oh, I gotta toss a frog. So frogs are my number one lure for a river system, especially in the summertime here, guys. So, but I'm gonna throw that basically on a 7.3 heavy fast action rod. Okay, so you want a heavy rod because you're in a lot of vegetation in the summertime, and frogs have big hooks, and you need to be able to get that fish up and out of there. I'm using 50-pound braid, and then I'm using a 7.3-to-1, as fast of a reel as I can get, because when you set the hook on a fish, you need to be able to get them up and out of there. So heavy fast action rod, guys. 7.3. I like a little bit longer rod for frogging, and then I'm using 50-pound braid, 7.3-to-1, 8.1-to-1 reel. That's what I'm using for a setup for frogging. There you guys have it. Those are my top lures for fishing a river system. That's pretty much not the only ones I use, but those are pretty much the ones I have tied on at all times and are kind of my go-tos in the summertime, especially out on a river system. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one.